Abetment is regarded as a crime in India and elsewhere in the world also, because the abetter has got criminal intention in his mind which is trying to pass on to the others who can commit the act. Maybe the abetter is unable to proceed with this crime, and maybe he can take the help of others, and therefore law recognizes this as a criminal act and is punished. Even if the act is not committed, the abetter is punished for that. And in fact, this is very predominantly practiced in India. So the reason being that these cases are not being taken to the courts, and even if it is taken to the courts, there is a prolonged period, waiting period, and one doesn't know that when the case will come to a closure. It will take a lot of time. So people desist in seeking the help of the law enforcing authorities. Therefore, in what other way this abatement can be checked? The only way is the government has to take necessary steps. They have to be proactive. Their work predominantly lays in construction of infrastructure works, maintaining foreign relations, and other such things, army, navy, air force. So, defense preparedness, internal security, and when it comes to the enforcement of law and order, it is left to the discretion of the other, maybe the police, and the minister may check up maybe at the helm. But naturally, what happens is the police is always being held responsible. Recently in Bangalore, we have seen that the policemen were suspended. Later on, they were reinstated. Same thing keeps happening there. But the government, in fact, in machinery as well as the leadership, who is at the helm, should check up this matter. And the offices also, it goes on unchecked, and it will take a very serious dimension. And at that time, like a cancer, which if it is checked initially, it is harmless. In fact, it can be treated. But when it goes out of control, it is the death of the system is imminent. Therefore, even in the national stream, this is a very atrocious things that is happening. Abatement people really take pleasure in abetting people. In fact, there has been abatement from one district to the other against just one person. One person. What do they get? They may get a pleasure in their mind, seeing the other person being put to trouble, or their criminal intention or being carried out by the other people. And the people are there to carry their forward whatever they say, dictates they do, and many people begin to follow them. That much is the euphoria they get. Human brain may be constructed in that way, and to check all this diversion, all this criminal intention, the government leadership has to take a control and not leave it to the discretion of the courts, law enforcing authorities, and other things, because it's a long way to go. But to check the things, willingness is required. A willingness is the most important of the things, and that should come up first. That is completely absent as of now. As of now, it is completely absent, but maybe in future it may come up. And they have, in fact, they have to be influenced. This political leadership, they have to be influenced on this point, and they have to be educated in this matter, because they are preoccupied and they think that is their business, and whatever happens down the line, it is of no concern to them. That way, an education is required to them, and things will turn out to be better. An instigation to commit crime is called as abetment. Abetment is recognized in law as a crime and punished according to the act committed. Even if the act is not committed, it is considered to be a crime and punished accordingly. In fact, in India, abetment takes place quite often in all activities of life. And in my own case and office, I've often written about this in the social science. Marathi speaking man used to come and tell me that people from Bombay, they are abetting crimes against you, used to say. But not exactly what is that abetment they're trying to make out, but this has been continuously going on. In fact, the law also recognizes that the case should be put forth in the court, and then only actions will be taken. Otherwise, people will not, they will not be considered as crime at all. But it is not so, because apart from the court, this holds good as far as the law courts are concerned. And there is a vibrant state, a vibrant government, and a lot of functionaries, and it is their duty to control the law and order before it goes to the courts. Right? The court cases are being piled up, and there is a lot of pendency due to the simple reason that the government is not acting as it has to do, because there is a lot of they ignore the things, and they don't really care about something, or that they are preoccupied with something else, some other important work. And now, what is more important is building roads, construction of roads, amenities, and of course, cutting down the trees. So, these are the things that is taking precedence, and this human values is going on. The Marathi man, I forget his name actually. No, it is 2015, I think so, 2015 or 14 in Bellary. And prior to that also, Gulberg also, one gentleman, I'm forgetting the names, I remember his name, but anyway, it's not required. The surname, Gulberg, what happens is they keep calling the surnames of the staff people. So everybody they call the same name, but they can identify. They don't call the first name. That is somewhat okay. In any case, he also told us abiding from Bangalore. What is this? So one thing is very clear: a crime is going on continuously in work atmosphere, and the government is continuously ignoring, or maybe the government itself is abetting such sort of crimes to keep somebody under check, or to keep people under leash. Uh, Maybe that is a thing, because though a democracy, things are not going according to the law and order. So apart from the courts are also unable to do anything, because there is a piling of cases. Under trial prisoners are more in number, and by the time they embrace death, it's difficult if judgment would be delivered. So that being the case, the government should spring into action. Political leadership should spring into action, because otherwise it takes a common course, and it takes a normalcy. Crime takes a normalcy. Uh, Marathi man, of course, I do remember that he was. He was constantly telling about the Abetment. He was also very much worried, because why they should call and disturb him and abet him to commit a crime against individual. So it's high time this government functionaries, political leadership, uh, they don't have the same mental setup. Times are changing, and they only changing this mm, criminal codes. Criminal codes. They say it is 300 years old, but what difference does it make? They must have made some minor alteration, of course, to the changing times, like electronic things and all were not there earlier when it was initiated. But otherwise, they are repetition of the same thing, human values. In fact, one should applaud those people, East India Company, to the British, because human uh, values they have enunciated, and those going against this human values, and what crimes are committed on account of this. They have tabled these things, and the same table is holding good to this day also. To this day also. Maybe during those time the punishment was very harsh. That way, those people were also very sort of a wicked persons, very harsh. But that should change now. And these people, they are holding on to the same thing and allowing crimes to be committed. Oh, this is a very serious crime because somebody from Indian subcontinent has been in the clutches of foreign rule for a pretty long time. A pretty long time in the sense for thousands of years. But of course, when you say thousands of years, prior to that, was it a golden period? The history books do show that the Indian subcontinent was divided into many kingdoms, empires. Empires were there. There were large empires, well-known empires, and there was also the golden period. But one or two empires we call the golden period. What about the others? As far as the North India is concerned, there are very big names, but most of them ruled before Christ, and it was during that Ashoka's rule. One comes to know about the prevailing situation during those times. Ashoka's rule, the person named Ashoka existed only through the edicts that has been found thousands of years later. And of course, what is the authenticity of this edicts? But people believe that whatever is written on the stones, sculpted on the stones, has happened. But there are one or two instances to show that Ashoka did exist, and there was a rule that was the spread of Buddhism across the eastern part of Asia, and maybe it could have been any other person also. Some Buddhist monks could also be spread. But take it for granted that Ashoka ruled over a large empire, and before that, before prior to Ashoka, there was the Greek invasion. That history is recorded in history. Alexander the Great, his invasion is recorded in history. But later on, why it does not happen? There were the travelers from China travelers, Xian Sang, well-known name, and some other persons. They must have recorded the spirit of Ashoka, but they have not recorded the war that has taken place between the Magadha Empire and the Kalinga Empire, and so that part of it. And there was the Gupta Empire, which is said to be the golden period, and maybe it has got some historical evidences in fact person existed there because Gupta period emperors Kumara Gupta, Skanda Gupta, so many Guptas were there. Everybody were not. As far as the South India is concerned, it was the Cholas who have crossed the seas, captured lands afar, East Asian nations, established an empire there. And of course, uh, there are the Pallavas, the Pandyas. Their rule is established because it was not prior to Christ. Maybe Cholas, Pallavas did live just a century before Christ. That's all. Not many years, many ages like Ashoka. And in fact, they have left a lot of evidences like arts and crafts, their buildings, the Mahabalipuram sculptures, a sort of thing, but their terraces are not found and has been razed. In fact, after that, Hindu rulers, Muslim invaders, they have not left any of the palaces, most probably, or due to the vagaries of nature, vagaries of nature that must have gone away. The Muslim rulers, of course, one of the Vijayanagar empires, they razed everything to the ground, leaving few of the monuments. So that may have happened down south also. Uh, in what do you call Chola period, um, Cholas of the decline of Cholas of the decline of Pallavas, Chola, Pallava, Cheras. So a lot of things has happened. So what happens is when one empire goes, the other empire comes, raises it to the ground. But this is not evidenced from the British rulers, because they haven't done that. So as far as knowledge goes, as far as the historical record goes. Uh, but what happens is, how did the company, East India Company, capture the power so easily? That is the mute question. Because they have come here for trading, they must be carrying sophisticated weapons for that day, which was not available with the Indians. But with the Santi man, few men, how could they capture? Because they have lateral emperors, or it was the seed was sown during the uh, during the golden period of the Indian empires only. Later on, the people were disillusioned because they were living in poverty, utter poverty. Uh, One can see that they were not wearing clothes, many of the poverty stricken people. So that they have grown very, what do you call, there is no anger. They cannot express their anger also. Emotionally disturbed. They were emotionally disturbed. In fact, living in the poverty when the kings were all enjoying their days, kings, nobles, and there were the few other rich people. They were all enjoying their days, and there were the lots of common people who were toiling the land and giving away taxes. So what happened was when the British traders came, they were offering the Indians money. They were offering them work to do. They were recruiting them as sepoys, and this is the money factor. More than that sophisticated part of the weapons this company people were having, East India Company. It was the money factor that drove the Indians, natives, to join the forces with them as even soldiers ready to give their life, and they were fighting against their own motherland. And but that is, thought itself wasn't there because very santy food to take, santy dress to wear. In fact, they were roaming, showing they were the shame has gone away from them. In fact, men, of course, they can go with light, but women, you think of that, it's very difficult. Even during the period of Gandhi, Gandhi was a latter birth in the British rule. In fact, even during those periods, this continued even during the British period. But at least whoever got an opportunity to join the English people, they have joined because the earning livelihood was important. They wanted to earn a livelihood at the cost of their lives. Of course, they were recruiting a lot of soldiers, and they were recruiting a large number of soldiers, of course, and the kingdoms. What happened? The decline of the empire. There was no other person capable enough to form an empire. They were satisfied with being chieftains, running smaller kingdoms. There were several small kingdoms in the southern part. When Madurai Nayaks also broke down, these chieftains were announced themselves as independent. They could not overrun the other chieftains, so they were satisfied with just one or two villages, a few villages. So this British people, East India Company, it was a very easy run for them because the natives themselves were joining forces with them, joining them as soldiers, ready to kill their own countrymen, and of course, they were also pitting one against the other. Even otherwise, there were people power. In fact, what you call the people power is simply lost by the empires, by the kingdoms. In fact, not the kingdoms. People, they were ready to wage a war. wage a war against their own kingdoms, their own soil. So whatever the songs, ballads, and all were there, they were just proved to be just entertainment. The same people were fighting against others. So it was an easy run down south for the Englishmen. The Englishmen traders, what they did was they did not have to fight in the initial time. They concluded treaties after treaties, and God only knows why that what is it, South Orcot Empire Kingdom was given away, lease the land, whether they are under my rule or whatever. Go and do anything you want, because this fellow was also this king also was having aversion towards his chieftains. They were not his chieftains as such, because he himself must have announced, I am the king of the whole thing, because maybe he was ruling over a bigger part. So when he saw the British Englishmen coming, they have already defeated the Bengal, taken over the Bengal Empire, and Mughals. Mughals were the one strongest empire. They were defeated with a Santi man. Same thing must have happened there. So that way, by offering money, money is making so many things happen here. So what happens is Indians by the forces of nature itself, by the happening, they have formed a very liking for money. In fact, it is entrenched in their mind. So it has been making rounds since then, and even to this day, what happens is there is a clamor for money. People's mind is filled with money. In the next one, I will talk about this my own experience. It is a little more than 4 years since I uploaded this story, and very good story. But that was uploaded during period of COVID, April 14th, and it happened to be the Tamil New Year. In fact, because I just want to repeat the same story, but maybe I have forgotten some of the lines, and maybe there is some addition. But in any case, I think that is the only story I can remember amongst all the other stories I've written, because other stories mostly on the crux of the moment, current affairs, the news, taking that into account, required a story. Some of the paragraphs maybe it's not coming to the up to the mind, but this is very fresh because some reason or other it is still in the mind. I can repeat it. There is a confidence, but still there may be something amiss in that also. Let's just get into the story. On the 14th of April 2020 afternoon, that was a sunny day when I narrated the story, and now it is October 3rd. Yesterday was 2nd, today is 3rd evening at 6 o'clock at sunset. That was midday, and this is sunset hours. And so the story begins with the airport launch, and an author is taking a flight to Nagaland. In fact, his Malleshwaram also I repeated somehow. He's on the way from Malleshwaram to the airport. So what happens is in the airport, boards the flight to Nagaland, Kohima Airport, and that being a sunny day, people are all very happy to board the sun to reach their destination. Some of them may be tourists, some of them may be the native of the place. In fact, there are a lot of people from Northeast coming over to Bangalore for work purposes, mostly for work purposes rather than for studies, because there's not much of a difference between Bangalore and Nagaland in case of studies concerns. And so they may, for work purpose, of course, there's a lot of difference, world of difference. And so they land up in Bangalore, because most of the foreign firms have established their concerns over here in Bangalore or not in Nagaland. So naturally, they come over here for seeking work, earning the livelihood. So they very happily they board, and the flight takes off, and there is no air hostess, but instructions comes from the computer or TV screen. So regarding emergency measures, when there is an emergency, what should be the actions taken by the passengers? So, but what happens is when the flight is midway through, the engine, there is a snag in the engine, and the passengers hear that announcement, emergency announcement, and immediately the passengers are panicked a lot. Some of them they are jittery to put on the seat belts properly because the nervousness. What will be the effect? The aircraft starts tumbling down, terrible speed, and of course it seems to be still because in case of a train, one can see the train moving, but it would appear at times that the landscape is moving. But in this instance, though the flight is moving very fast, the sky doesn't appear to move at all. Clouds sometimes very slowly pass by. So suddenly, when it starts tumbling, they can know that it is falling, and their blood pressure shoots up. Very difficult. Somehow, survival itself is a very precarious thing. And before the plane crashes to the ground, many people, out of panic and fear, the life will pass on. But luckily, this time it did not happen. The old, the young, the middle aged, everybody survived, and they were tumbling down. Though it was tumbling down, at the nick of the moment when it was about to touch the ground, the snag rectifies. Pilot very carefully takes the flight up back to the skies, and there it lands in Nagaland. But in Nagaland Kohima airport, what happens is there is a mentally upset. People are mentally upset. Some of them, of course, they can recollect their memories, and the possibility is there that people have lost the memories also, and not much. It is a very rare situation, but rare things do happen, and people they are being taken the stretches in Nagaland, Kohima, and of course this particular author he wants to go over to Manipur, and Nagaland happens to be the transit point. From Nagaland he has to take a train. Nagaland has got a very big airport, so he takes a flight to Nagaland and from there to Manipur. But now he forgets his machine what to do because there is a bit of memory loss. Maybe he can regain it, but not in the near future. Maybe not in a week's time, not in a month's time. Maybe it comes back also because what the mind matters one can certainly not cannot say with certainty. Mind matters, but it holds good throughout the life from birth to death. But at times in between something happens jittery, and one cannot say when it gets all right. So in this case, he loses where he's going. He doesn't know. But the first thing is he has to get to the hotel and settle down there. When he goes to the hotel, he sees the reception is very tall, and it doesn't look like an Indian national at all, a foreigner. And he introduces himself as Russian. I'm Russian. Welcome to the hotel. Welcome to the body. There is no reaction. Of course, and it's even if you do not know the English language or how to respond in some way, maybe actions is Russian because actions are have been the first actions have been the first sign language. In fact, not actions. Sign language has been the first language of human beings, and it is why I was responding that way also. You have to respond in some way. And when I came to India, I was not having any knowledge about English language, but it is a very easy language, only 24 alphabets. Tamil, you see, it is more than 200 alphabets. The hotel people, they were very, employers were very good, and they asked me to talk in sign languages only, and customers were more very good. In fact, they were responding in sign language. And in course of time, I learned English. But this land has been ruled by people whose mother tongue happened to be English, and they introduced English. And every Indian should be knowledgeable about this language. But you're so dumb and deaf. What happens? Anyway, can't you speak in sign language also? At that time, his memory gets some. So there is a shock in his mind that nurse currents deaths, and it goes back to school days. And remembers the school days teacher. Once she was asking him to asking the student to read out passages from the English text or ready to read out. In fact, in Bangalore, it was a Mysore reader for all the schools, but this particular teacher introduced radiant reader. But so that was a good measure, in fact, and the students have to be thankful because Mysore reader was very easy, and it has got some more stuff, it's a little more advanced. Okay, that way. So what happened was that when the Russians said about this language, not knowledgeable about the language, remembers that, and it says, at that time I was talking very good English, and now there is a Russian who says I'm not knowledgeable about the language, and now I cannot even open my mouth, yeah, and respond to him. So what should I do now? So he thinks that day, or he thinks of the time when the teacher appreciated about his language, his pronouncement. In fact, the teacher was appreciating all the students on one count or the other, and now he remembers that he was on the way to Manipur, and there was a student who used to get first rank, and teacher was asking him to progress, be little more better in studies. In fact, she was asking him to make efforts to get a first rank, lead the student. And there was another student who came over from Chennai. At the time, it was called Madras. From Madras, she used to keep ash on the forehead, white ash. Before coming to this classroom, she used to go to the temple, put that vibhuti and come. Well, that ash is called vibhuti. That is a divine blessing will be there. That is a belief with the Hindus. Say from morning to evening, that vibhuti. Immediately she took over. She was getting first rank, and the teacher asked students to uh, improve his handwriting earlier. After the student got first language, he stopped asking him to write the page of handwriting and show it to her. Anyway, so he was on his way to Manipur by train, and he knew that he had come over to Manipur in search of that student. And he was not now going over to searching for that 50-year-old student, but a 50-year-old woman, but a 10 years age student. So next episode. Today I begin a new life. Today I shed my old skin, which hath too long suffered the bruises of failure and the wounds of mediocrity. Today I am born anew, and my birthplace is a vineyard, where there is fruit for all. Today I will pluck the grapes of wisdom from the tallest and fullest vines in the vineyard, for these were planted by the wisest of my profession, who have come before me generation upon generation. Today I will savour the taste of grapes from these vines, and verily I will swallow the seed of success buried in each. A new life will sprout within me. The career I have chosen is laden with opportunity, yet it is fraught with heartbreak and despair. On the bodies of those who have failed, where they piled one atop another, would cast its shadow down upon all the pyramids of the earth. Yet I will not fall as the others, for in my hands I now hold the charge which will guide me through the perilous waters to shores which only yesterday seemed but a dream. Failure will no longer be the payment for struggle, just as nature has made no provision for my body to tolerate pain. Neither has it made any provision for my life to suffer failure. Failures like pain is alien to my life. In the past, I have accepted pain, for now I reject it, and I am prepared for wisdom and principles which will guide me out of the shadows into the sunlight of wealth, position, and happiness, far beyond my most extravagant dreams, until even the golden apples in the garden of Hesperides will seem no more than my just rewards. Time teaches all things to he who lives forever, but I have not the luxury of eternity. Yet within my allotted time I must practice the patience, for nature acts never in haste. To create the alive king of all trees, 100 years is required. An onion plant is old in 9 weeks. I have lived as an onion plant. It has not pleased me. Now I would become the greatest of alive trees, and in truths. And how will this be accomplished? For I have neither the knowledge nor the experience to achieve greatness, and already I have stumbled in ignorance and fallen into pools of self pity. The answer is simple. I will commence my journey unencumbered with either the weight of the unnecessary knowledge or the handicap of meaningless experience. Nature already has supplied me with knowledge and instituted far greater than any beast in the forest, and the value of experience is overrated usually by old men who note wisely and speak stupidly. In truth, experience teaches thoroughly, yet a course of instruction devour man's ears, so the value of a lesson diminishes with the time necessary to acquire a special wisdom. The end finals is wasted on dead men. Furthermore, experience is compatible to fail on an action that proved successful today will be unworkable and impractical tomorrow. Only principles endure, and these I now possess, for the last that will lead me to greatness or contained in the words. What they will teach me is more to prevent failure than to gain success. For what is success other than a state of mind? Or which two among 1,000 wise men will define success in the same words? Yet failure is always described but one way. Failure is man's inability to reach his goals in life, whatever they may be. In truth, the only difference between those who have failed and those who have succeeded lies in the difference of their habits. Good habits are the key to all success. Bad habits are the unlocked door to failure. Then the first law I will obey, to which presideth all others, is I'll form good habits and become their slaves. As a child I was slave to my impulses. Now I am slave to my habits. As an old grown man, I have surrendered my free will to the years of accumulated habits, and the past days of my life have already marked out a pain which threatens to imprison my future. My actions are ruled by appetite, passion, uh, prejudice, greed, love, fear, environment, habits are the worst of all of these tyrants is habit. Therefore, if I must be a slave to habit, let me be a slave to good habits. My bad habits must be destroyed and new forests prepared for good seeds. I will form good habits to become their slave. And how will I accomplish this difficult feat? Through this, it will be done alone. It will be done. For each contains a principle which will drive a bad habit from my life and replace it with one which will bring me close to success. For it is another of nature law that only a habit can subdue another habit. So, in order for these written words to perform like chosen task, I must discipline myself with the first as my new habits, which is as follows. I will read each for 30 days in this prescribed manner before I proceed to the next. First, I will read the words in silence when I arise. Then I will read the words in silence after I have partaken of my midday meals. And last, I will read the words again just before I retire at day's end. And most important, on this occasion, I will read the words aloud. On the next day, I will repeat the procedure, and I will continue this in the like manner for 30 days until I have lived with each for 30 days. And my writing has become a habit. An absent speed reading. The double soul in man. The first status of life we found to be characterized by a dumb, inconscient drive or urge, a force of some involved will in the material or atomic existence, not free and possessor of itself or its works or their results, but entirely possessed by the universal movement in which it arises as obscure and formed a still of individuality. The root of the second standard is desire, eager to possess but limited in capacity. The bud of the third is love, which seeks both to possess and be possessed, to receive and to give itself. The fine flower of the fourth, its sign of perfection, we consider the pure and full emergence of the original will, the element fulfillment of the intermediate desire, the high and deep satisfaction of the conscious interchange of love by the unification of the state of the possessor and possessing the divine unity of souls, which is the foundation of the supramental existence. If we scrutinize these terms carefully, we shall see that they are the shapes and stages of the soul seeking for the individual and universal delight of things. The ascent of life is in its own nature, and ascent of the divine delight in things from its dumb conception in matter through vicissitudes and opposites to its luminous consummation in spirit. The world being what it is, it could not be otherwise. For the world is masked form of Satchidananda, and the nature of consciousness of Satchidananda, therefore the thing in which its force must always find and achieve itself is divine bliss and omnipresent self-delight. Since life is an energy of its conscious force, the secret of all its movement must be hidden delight inherent in all things, which is at once cause, motive, and object of its activities. And if by reason of egoistic division the delight is missed, if it is held back behind everything, if it is represented as its own opposite, even as being is masked in death, consciousness figures as the inconscient and force marks itself with a gas of incapacity, then that which lives cannot be satisfied, cannot either rest from the moment or fulfill the moment except by laying hold on this universal delight, which is at once the secret total delight of its own being and the original, all-encompassing, all-informing, all-upholding delight of the transcendent and immanent Satchidananda. To seek for delight is therefore the fundamental impulse and sense of life. To find and possess and fulfill is its sole motive. But wherein is this principle of delight? Through what term of our being does it manifest and fulfill itself in the action of the cosmos? Is the principle of conscious force manifest and uses life for its cosmic term, and the principle of supermind manifest and uses mind. We have distinguished a fourfold principle of divine being, creative of the universe, existence, conscious force, bliss, and supermind. Supermind, we have seen, is omnipresent in the material cosmos, but it is behind the actual phenomenon of things and accurately expresses itself there, but uses for affectation its own subordinate mind. The divine conscious force is omnipresent in the material cosmos, but veiled operative secretly behind the actual phenomenon of things, and it expresses itself there characteristically through its own subordinate term life. And though we have not yet examined exactly the principle of matter, yet we can already see that the divine all existence also is omnipresent in the material cosmos, but veiled, hidden behind the actual phenomenon of things, and manifests itself there initially through its own subordinate term, substance, or form of being or matter. Then, equally, the principle of divine bliss must be omnipresent in the cosmos, veiled indeed and possessing itself behind the actual phenomenon of things, but still manifested in us through some subordinate principle of its own, in which it is hidden by and by which it must be found and achieved in the action of the universe. The term is something in us which we sometimes call in a special sense the soul, that is to say, the psychic principle which is not the life or the mind, much less the body, but which holds in itself the opening and flowering of the essence of all this to their own peculiar delight of self, to light, to love, to joy, and to beauty, and to refined purity of being. In fact, how there is a double soul or psyche term in us, as every other cosmic principle in us is also double, for we have two minds. One surface mind of our express evolutionary ego, the superficial mentality created by sin of our emergent sort of matter. Another is subliminal mind, which is not hampered by our actual mental life and its strict limitations, as something large, powerful, and luminous, the true mental being, or behind that superficial form of mental personality which we mistake for ourselves. So also we have two lives, the outer, involved in the physical body, bound by its past evolution in matter, which lives and was born and will die. The other is subliminal force of life, which is not cabined between the narrow boundaries of our physical birth and death, but is our true vital being behind the form of living which we ignorantly take for our real existence. Other than the matter of our being, there is this duality, for behind our body we have subliminal existence, which provides a substance of not only of our physical but of our mental and mental sheets, and is therefore our real substance supporting this physical form which we erroneously imagine to be the whole body of our spirit. So do we have a double psychic entity in us, a surface desire soul which works in our vital cravings or emotions, aesthetic faculty and mental seeking for power, knowledge, and happiness, and a subliminal psychic entity, a pure power of light, a love, joy, and refined essence of being, which is our true soul behind the outer form of psychic existence we so often dignify by the name. It is when some reflection of this larger and purer psychic entity comes to the surface that we say of a man, he has a soul, and when it is absent in his outer psychic life, that we say of him he has no soul. The external forms of being are those of our small egoistic existence, subliminal are the formations of our larger true individuality. Therefore, or there that concealed part of our being in which our individuality is close to our universality, touches it, is the constant relation and commerce with it. The subliminal mind in us is open to the universal knowledge of the cosmic mind. The subliminal life in us is to the universal force of the cosmic life. The subliminal physicality in us to this universal force formation of cosmic matter. The thick walls which divide from these things our surface mind, life, body, and which the nature has to pierce with so much trouble, so imperfectly, and by so many skillful clumsy physical devices are there in the subliminal. Only a rarefied medium at once is of separation and communication. So doing, the subliminal soul in us is open to the universal delight which the cosmic soul takes in its own existence, and in the existence of the myriad souls that represent it, and in the operations of mind, life, and matter, by which nature lends the soul to the play and development. But from this cosmic delight, the surface soul is shut up by egoistic walls of great thickness, which have indeed gates of penetration. But at the entry through them, the touches of the divine cosmic delight become dwarfed, distorted, or have to come in much as their own opposites. It follows that in the surface or desire soul there is no true soul life, but a psychic deformation and wrong reception of the touch of things. The malady of the world is that the individual cannot find his real soul, and the root cause of this malady is again that he cannot meet in his embrace of things outward the real soul of the world in which he lives. He seeks to find there the essence of being, the essence of power, the essence of conscious existence, the essence of delight. But receives instead a crowd of contradictory touches and impressions. If he could find that essence, he would find also the one universal being, power, conscious existence, and delight, even in strong of touches and impressions. The contradictions of what seems to be reconciled in the unity and harmony of the truth which that touches out to us in this context. At the same time, we find his own true soul, and through it his self, because the true soul is the self's delegate, and the self and self of the world are one. But this he cannot do because of this, the egoistic ignorance, the mind of thought, the heart of emotion, the sense which responds to the touch of things not by a courageous and wholehearted embrace of the world, but by a flux of reachings and shrinkings, cautious approaches or eager rushes, and sullen or discontent or panic or angry recalls according as the touch pleases or displeases, comforts or alarms, satisfies or dissatisfies. It is the desires world that by its wrong reception of life becomes the cause of a triple misinterpretation of the rest of the delight of things, so that instead of figuring the pure essential joy of being, it becomes rendered unequal into the three terms of pleasure, pain, and indifference. We have seen, one, we consider the delight of existence in relation to the world, that there is no absoluteness or essential validity in our stance of pleasure and pain and indifference, that they are entirely determined by the subjectivity of the receiving consciousness, and that the degree of either pleasure and pain can be heightened to a maximum or depressed to a minimum, or even effaced entirely in its apparent nature. Pleasure can become pain or pain pleasure, because in the secret reality they are the same thing differently reproduced in the sensations and emotions. Indifference is either the inattention of the surface desire soul in its mind, sensations, emotions, and cravings to the rest of things, or its incapacity to receive and respond to it, or its refusal to give any surface response, or again its driving and crushing down of the pleasure or pain by the will into the neutral tint of unacceptance. In all these cases, what happens is that either there is a positive refusal or a negative unreadiness or incapacity to render it, or in any way represent positively on the surface something that is yet subliminally active. For, as we know by psychological observation and experiment, that the subliminal mind receives and remembers all the stretches of things which the surface mind ignores, so also we shall find that the subliminal soul responds to the rest or essence of an experience of these things which the surface desire soul rejects by distaste and refusal, or ignores by neutral unacceptance. A self-knowledge is impossible unless we go behind our surface existence, which is the mere result of selective outer experiences, an imperfect sounding board, or a hasty, incompetent, and fragmentary translation of a little out of the much that we are. Unless we go behind this and send out down or plummet into the subconscious and open to ourselves to the superconscious, so as to know their relation to our surface being. For between these three things, our existence moves and finds in them its totality. The superconscious in us is one with the self and soul of the world, and is not governed by any phenomenal diversity. It possesses therefore the truth of things and the delight of things in their plenitude. The subconscious, so-called, in that luminous set of itself which we call the subliminal, is, on the contrary, not a true processor, but an instrument of experience. It is not practically one with the soul and self of the world, but it is open to it through its world experience. The subliminal soul is conscious inwardly of the rest of things and has an equal delight in all contacts. It is conscious also of the values and standards of touches of pleasure and pain and indifference, but takes an equal delight in all. In other words, our real soul within takes joy of all its experiences, gathers from them strength, pleasure, and knowledge, grows by them in its store and its plenty. It is this real soul in us that which compels the shrinking desire mind to bear and even to seek and find a pleasure in what is painful to it, to reject what is pleasant to it, to modify or even reverse its values, to equalize things in indifference or to equalize them in joy. The joy of the variety of existence, this it does because there is impulse by the universal to develop itself by all kinds of experience so as to grow in nature. Otherwise, if we were lived only by surface desire soul, we could no more change or advance than the plant of stone in whose immobility or in whose routine of existence. Or because life is not superficially conscious, the secret soul of things as it no instrument by which it can rescue the life out of the fixed and narrow gamut which it is born. The desire soul is left to itself would circle in the same grooves forever. On the view of the world fellows which pleasure and pain are inseparable, like intellectual truth and falsehood and power and incapacity and birth and death, therefore the only possible escape from them would be a total indifference, a blank response to the excitations of the world self. But the subtle psychological knowledge shows us that this view, which is based on the surface facts of existence only, it does not really exhaust the possibilities of the problem. It is possible by bringing the real soul to the surface to replace the egoistic standards of pleasure and pain by an equal and all-embracing impersonal delight. The lover of nature does this when he takes joy in all the things of nature, universally without admitting repulsion or fear or mere liking and disliking, perceiving beauty in that which seems to others mean and insignificant, barren, savage, terrible, and repellent. The artist and the poet do it when they seek the rest of the universal from the aesthetic emotion, or from the physical line, or from the mental form of beauty, or from the inner sense and power alike of that from which ordinary man turns away, and of that to which he is attached by a sense of pleasure. The seeker of knowledge, the God lover who finds the object of his love everywhere, the spiritual man, the intellectual, the sensuous, the aesthetic, all do this in their own fashion and must do it if they would find embracingly the knowledge, the beauty, the joy, or the divinity which they seek. It is only in the parts where the little ego is usually too strong for us. It is only in our emotional or physical joy and suffering, or pleasure and pain of life, before which the desired soul in us is utterly weak and cowardly, that the application of the divine principle becomes supremely difficult and seems to many impossible or even monstrous and repellent. Here the ignorance of the ego shrinks from the principle of impersonality, which it yet applies without too much difficulty in science, in order, and even in a certain kind of imperfect spiritual living, because there the rule of impersonality does not attack those desires cherished by the surface soul and those values of the desire fixed by the surface mind, in which our outward life is most vitally interested. In the freer and higher moments, there is a demanded of us only a limited and specialized equality in impersonality, proper to a particular field of consciousness and activity, while the egoistic basis of our practical life remains to us in the lower movements. The whole foundation of our life has to be changed in order to make room for impersonality, and this the desired soul finds impossible. The true soul secret in us, subliminal, we have said, but the world is misleading, for this presence is not situated below the threshold of waking mind, but rather burns in the temple of the inmost heart, behind the thick screen of an ignorant mind, life and body, not subliminal but behind the veil. This veiled psychic entity is the flame of the Godhead always alive within us, indistinguishable even by the dense unconsciousness of any spiritual self within which obscures our outward nature. It is a flame born out of the divine and a luminous inhabitant of the ignorance, grows in it till it is able to turn it towards the knowledge. It is the concealed witness and control, the hidden guide, the diamond of Socrates, the inner light or inner voice of the mystic. It is that which endures and is imperishable in us from birth to birth, untouched by death, decay or corruption, an indestructible spark of the divine, not the unborn self or Atman. For the self, even in presiding over the existence of the individual, is aware always of its universality and transcendence. It is yet its debuted in the forms of nature, the individual soul, Kaitya Purusha, supporting mind, a life and body, standing behind the mental, the vital, the subtle physical being in us, and watching and profiting by the development and experience. These other person powers in man, these beings of his being, are also wielded in the true entity, but they put forward temporary personalities which compose our outward individuality and whose combined superficial action and appearance of status we call ourselves. This inmost entity also, taking form in us as a psychic person, puts forward a psychic personality which changes, grows, develops from life to life. For this is the traveler between birth and death, between death and birth. Our nature paths are only its manifold and changing vesture. The psychic being can at first exercise only a concealed and partially indirect action through the mind, the life and body. Since it is these parts of nature that have to be developed as its instruments of self-expression, and it is long confined by the revolution, a machine to lead man in the ignorance towards the light of the divine consciousness. It takes the essence of all experience in the ignorance to form a nucleus of soul growth in the nature. The rest it turns into material for the future growth of the instruments which it has to use until they are ready to be a luminous instrumentation of the divine. It is the secret psychic entity which is the true original consciousness, deeper than the constructed and conventional consciousness of its moralist. For it is this which points always towards truth and right and beauty, towards love and harmony, and all that is the divine possibility in us, and persist till these things become the major need of our nature. It is the psychic personality in us that flowers as the saint, the sage, the seer. When it reaches its full strength, it turns the being towards the knowledge of self and the divine, towards the supreme truth, the supreme good, the supreme beauty, love and bliss, the divine heights and largenesses, and opens us to the touch of spiritual sympathy, universality, oneness. On the contrary, where the psychic personality is weak, crude, or ill-developed, the finer parts and movements in us are lacking or poor in character and power, even though the body, mind, are forceful and brilliant, the heart of vital emotions hard and strong, and masterful, the life force dominant and successful, the bodily existence rich and fortunate, and an apparent lord and victor. It is then the outer desire soul, the side of psychic entity, that reigns, and we mistake its misinterpretation of psychic suggestion and aspiration, its ideas and ideals, its desire and earnings for the true soul stuff and wealth of spiritual experience. It is the secret psychic person can come forward into front and repressing the desired soul, govern overtly and entirely, and not only partially, and from behind the veil, this outer nature of mind, life and body, and this can be cast into soul images of what is true, right and beautiful, and in the end the whole nature can be turned towards the real aim of life, the supreme victor, the ascent into spiritual existence. But it might seem then that by bringing the psychic entity, the true soul in us, into the front and giving it that the lead and rule, we shall gain all the fulfillment of a natural being that we can seek, and open also the gates of the kingdom of the spirit. And it might well be reasoned that there is no need for any intervention of a superior truth consciousness or principle of superman to help us to attain to the divine status or the divine perfection. Yet, although the psychic transformation is a necessary condition of the total transformation of our existence, it is not all that is needed for the larger spiritual change. In the first place, since this is the individual soul in nature, it can open to the hidden divine ranges of our being and receive and reflect their light and power and experience. But another, a spiritual transformation from above, is needed for us to possess ourselves in its universality and transcendence. By itself, the psychic being at a certain stage might be content to create a formation of truth, the good and beauty, and make that its station. At a further stage, it might become passively subject to the world self, a mirror of the universal existence, consciousness, power, delight, but not the full participant or possessor. All the more nearly and thrillingly united through the cosmic consciousness in knowledge, emotion, and even appreciation through the senses, it might become purely recipient and residue and remote from mastery and action in the world, or one with the static self behind the cosmos, but separate inwardly from the world movement, or losing its individuality in source. It might return to that source and have neither the will nor the power nor any further for that which was its ultimate mission here, to lead the nature also towards its divine realization. For the psychic being came into nature from the self, the divine, and it can turn back from nature to the silent divine, to the silence of the self and the supreme spiritual immobility. Again, an eternal portion of the divine. This part is by the law of the infinite inseparable from its divine whole. This part is indeed itself that whole, except in its frontal appearance, its frontal separated self-experience. It may awaken to that reality and plunge into it into the apparent extinction or at least the merging of the individual existence, a small nuclear in the mass of our ignorant nature, so that it is described in the Upanishad as no bigger than the man's thumb. It can be the spiritual influx enlarge itself and embrace the whole world with the heart and mind in an intimate communion or oneness, or it may become aware of its eternal companion and elect to live forever in his presence, in an imperishable union and oneness in an eternal lover over the eternal beloved, which of all spiritual experience is the most intense in beauty and rapture. All these are great and splendid achievements of a spiritual self-finding, but they are not necessarily the last end and the entire consummation. More is possible, for these are achievements of the spiritual mind in man. They are the movements of that mind passing beyond itself, but on its own plane, into the splendors of the spirit. Mind, even at its highest stages, far beyond our present mentality, acts yet in its nature by division. It takes the aspects of the eternal and treats each aspect as if it were the whole truth of the eternal being, and can find in each its own perfect fulfillment. Even it erects them into opposites and creates a whole range of these opposites. The silence of the divine and the divine dynamics, the immobile Brahman aloof from existence without qualities, and the active Brahman with qualities, Lord of existence, being and becoming, the divine person and impersonal pure existence. It can then cut itself away from one and plunge itself into the other as the sole abiding truth of existence. It can regard the person as the sole reality of the impersonal as alone true. It can regard the lover as only a means of expression of eternal love, or love as only the self-expression of the lover. It can see beings as only personal powers of an impersonal existence, or impersonal existence only a state of the one being. The infinite person, his spiritual achievement, its road of passage towards the supreme being, will follow these dividing lines. But beyond this moment of spiritual mind is the higher experience of the supermind truth consciousness. There these opposites disappear and these partialities are relinquished in the rich totality of a supreme and integral realization of eternal being. It is this that is the aim we have conceived, the consummation of our existence here by an ascent of the ascent to the supramental truth consciousness and its design into our nature. The psychic transformation after rising into the spiritual change has then to be completed, integralized, exceeded, and uplifted by a supramental transformation which lifts it to the summit of the ascending endeavor, even as between the other divided and opposite terms of the manifested being. So also supramental consciousness energy could alone establish a perfect harmony within these two terms, apparently opposite only because of the ignorance of spirit status and world dynamism in our embodied existence. In the ignorance, nature centers the order of our psychological movements, not around the secret spiritual self, but around its substitute, the ego principle. A certain egocentrism is the basis on which we bind together our experiences and relations in the midst of the complex contacts, contradictions, dualities, incoherence of the world in which we live. In this, egocentrism is our rock of safety against the cosmic and the infinite, our defense. But in our spiritual change, we have to forget this defense. Ego has to vanish. The person finds itself dissolved into a vast impersonality, and in this impersonality there is at first no key to an ordered dynamism of action. A very usual result is that one is divided into two parts of being, the spiritual within, the natural without. In one there is the divine realization seated in a perfect inner freedom, but the natural part goes on with the old action of nature, continues by a mechanical movement of past energies as already transmitted impulse. Even if there is an entire dissolution of the limited person of the old egocentric order, the outer nature may become the field of an apparent incoherence, although all within is luminous with the self. Thus we become outwardly inert and active, moved by circumstance or forces, but not self-mobile, even though the consciousness is enlightened within. Or as a child, though within it is a plenary self-knowledge, or as an inconsequent in thought and impulse, though within is an utter common serenity, or as the wild and disordered soul, though inwardly there is the purity and poise of the spirit. Or if there is an order dynamism in the outward nature, it may be a continuation of the superficial ego action witnessed but not accepted by the inner being, or a mental dynamism that cannot be perfectly expressive of the inner spiritual realization. For there is no equivalence between action of spirit and status of spirit. Even at the best, where there is an intuitive guidance of light from within, the nature of its expression in dynamism of action must be mocked with the imperfection of mind, life, and body. A king with incapable ministers, a knowledge expressed in the valleys of the ignorance. Only the descent of the Superman is perfect unity of the truth knowledge and truth will as can establish in the outer as in the inner existence the harmony of the spirit. For it alone can turn the values of the ignorance entirely into the values of the knowledge, and the fulfillment of a psychic being as is the consummation of our parts of mind and life. It is the relating of it to its divine source. It is to its correspondent truth in the supreme reality. That is the indispensable moment, and here too, that is as there, it is by the power of Superman that it can be done with an integral completeness and intimacy that becomes an authentic identity. For it is the Superman which links the higher and the lower hemispheres of the one existence. The in Supermind is the integrating light, the consummating force, the wide entry into the supreme ananda. The psychic being uplifted by that light and force can unite itself with the original delight of existence from which it came, overcoming the dualities of pain and pleasure, delivering from all fear and shrinking the mind, life and body. It can recast the contacts of existence in the terms of the divine ananda of existence. It may be reasoned this God is a conscious being who is the author of existence. How then can God have created a world in which he inflicts suffering on his creatures, sanctions pain, permits evil, God being all good, who created pain and evil? Officer, that pain is a trial and an ordeal. We do not solve the moral problem. We arrived at an immoral or non-moral God, an excellent world mechanist perhaps, a cunning psychologist, but not a God of good and of law, whom we can worship, only a God of might to whose law, or must submit or whose caprice we may hope to propitiate. For one who invents torture as a means of test or ordeal stands convicted either of deliberate cruelty or moral insensibility, and of a moral being at all is inferior to the highest instincts of his own creatures. And if to escape this moral difficulty we say that pain is an inevitable result and natural punishment of moral evil, an explanation which will not even square with the facts of life unless we admit the theory of karma and rebirth by which the soul suffers now for antenatal sins in other bodies, we still do not escape the very root of that ethical problem. We who created our wire once was created the moral evil, which entails the punishment of pain and suffering, and seeing that moral evil is in reality a form of mental disease or ignorance. Who or what created this lower inevitable connection which punishes a mental disease or act of ignorance by recall so terrible, by tortures often so extreme and monstrous? The inexorable law of karma is irreconcilable with the supreme and moral and personal deity, and therefore the clear logic of Buddha denied the existence of any free and all-governing personal God, all personality declared to be a creation of the ignorance and subject to during the ancient times, at the beginning of the civilization, everything appeared to be a mystery, a mysterious beginning, because nothing, though the human brains were capable of learning, and a learning process could be initiated in the course of time. But at that time, whatever was visible was a mystery. The tree was a mystery. The cat was a mystery. So, whatever the environment, but to discern and give the word to that, it is a mystery. The brain was not taking in that word, because whatever was moving, whatever was stationary, mind was not able to recollect and say this is a mystery, this is not a mystery. Because in the primordial times, what was the first thought was to quench the thirst, to quench the thirst, and of course to fill the belly, hunger pangs. To quench the thirst and quench the hunger pangs was the foremost, and there was no other thoughts that was emanating. And slowly after this was it was taking a lot of time, long time. The brain was unfolding its thoughts, unfolding the potential it is embedded in it. And what a stupendous creation it is, because everything is being embedded at this beginning of the creation itself in the human minds, human brains. but without being embedded, how it will come through. And now, after several centuries, still the unfolding is going on. Still, whatever is embedded is coming out, and how much discoveries have come through. But one says that even during those primordial times, there were the thought waves that were going on to bring about bring about the mystery to a conclusion, because it is not remaining any more mystery. What the composition of the stars, and how many, what is the duration of the uh, Earth's rotation, revolution, everything was known before the science made its strides. Strides made its stride in the sense when it was put into writing, when there was a subject matter that could be passed on from one generation to the other, from one person to the other. And before that only, the human mind was slowly uh, instinctively passing on. But unlike the general ideas, the scientific queries were very not being imbibed by the whole of the population. There were the certain people, certain individuals who could be more intelligent and grasp things and pass it on. But though it could not be done through writing, and before this, only when the vocabulary was developed, or before the vocabulary was developed, what happened? There was a learning process that was going on. Vocabulary was only an addition to the learning process. Even before the sign language was known, there was a learning process. So learning process has been going on throughout, and the learning process, in the sense, whatever is embedded in the mind, it is coming to the surface. The mind's knowledge is coming to the surface, and how well it is embedded. It is something is not coming from outside the world. Whatever comes is within, and within the world, and similarly the individuals also. Whatever is coming is from within the human frame. Whether the knowledge is stored in the brains, whether it is stored in the cells, the environment is known to the brains or the cells, whether it can analyze, calculate things, arithmetic. Before arithmetic was known, arithmetic, subtract, minus, will do all sorts of things. But over the centuries, what happened was, now we are in the century when human beings can fly the planes, not only within the atmosphere of the earth, but beyond that also. But efforts are made to take it to the general public, because outside the earth's atmosphere is almost restricted to few people, few individuals, and that requires lot of an amount of training and acumen. So in the process, in the as a passage of the time, it may come to the general public also, because as everything else. So that is the human progress that is making strides. But in what way it is ultimately coming to that goal, because when we talk about that ultimate goal, it is not found anywhere, because that universe is such a vast space, it cannot be really discerned to what extent it is. Where is that end? Only when the end is found, that goal is can be realized, because until then there is no goal, in fact, because the progression, it is going on from this stage to the next stage, from the next stage to the next stage. And ultimately, when we turn back, we will see that when we have reached that farthest step, that step had also could have possibly be accomplished even during the primordial times. Even during it was the possibilities existed, in fact. There are a lot of stories that is being circulated through the textbooks, religious text, or the customary. So that is the thing, whether we really progressed or in between, whether this knowledge that was being passed, that memory has been lost in sort of a thing, and suddenly that memory came up, and we state that the history is from this stage only, from here only things are known. Before that, once again we have to go back and check up things. What do you say, excavations, to excavations and other things, know it, and that will not give the full picture. But maybe everything, whatever is the most, some more steps to come, when we attain there, human beings as a whole attain there, we may turn back and it will be an astonishment, but everything was known at once. Before even this learning part, sorry, before this vocabulary could have been developed, because vocabulary is an addition, and that to say that distinct possibilities exist, in fact.